have the highest unemployment at 18.8%, and we're aware that one of the weapons to use to manage unemployment is to actually grow our SME base. So they're actually the engine of growth. And there are so many issues affecting this sector as to why he has not realized its objectives that it's supposed to do. So as we listen to our speakers, we'll be very excited in knowing how we can manage these issues and how we can actually unleash the potentials of our SME sectors. So I have with me today two powerful speakers, like I mentioned, Nnamdi Okonkwo, who is the MD CEO of Fidelity Bank. I'd like to ask Nnamdi to please come to the stage. I think, yeah. So also with us is Zenzi Dillon, who is the founder and the chief executive of Camel Global Capital on Wall Street in New York. For those who are around yesterday, Zenzi did teach us a new word on SMEs, that we should stop calling them SMEs because it limits them by calling them small, but we should call them emerging enterprises. So please join me to welcome Zenzi to the high table. All right, so we'll be starting with Nnamdi in a moment. We'll have 20 minutes, please, to take us through the topic. Then we'll call on Zenzi. And then afterwards, we'll have like 15 minutes to spend on questions and answers. So please ask for cards as you have questions, so that you can note them. So thank you very much. I'd like to call on Nnamdi. Please come.
Thank you. Thank you. I know. Good morning once again. I believe my job is very easy this morning. Being that this is the industry where I've been in the last 29 years, I haven't done any other job but banking straight from the university. However, I'm not a financial expert. We're basically supposed to talk about available sources of finance for now. Did somebody say emerging enterprises? Okay, we would adjust that. It's just that my bank has won a lot of awards as the preferred SME bank. So I don't know how we're going to get used to saying preferred, is it EBE now? Okay, so it's very pretty straightforward because I have 20 minutes. Somehow I get a sense that everyone knows the sources of finance for SMEs. This is what I'm used to. Pardon me, I'll eventually switch. But I'll start by attempting to define what we mean by capital or finance. There are many textbook definitions, many, but one thing is common. All of them see finance as a resource leveraged on by an entity. Okay. Leveraged by an entity. Yeah, you can switch off that one. I think it's echoing. Somebody should want this microphone. People have been speaking since morning, no problem. Now my turn. Maybe we should say back to center. Okay, just kidding. So leverage on by entities to achieve set financial goals. But for today's concept, we would simply like to, I think this one is okay. We would like to simply say that financial capital is any economic resource measured in terms of money used by entrepreneurs and businesses to buy what they need to make their products or to provide their services to the sector of the economy upon which their operation is based. Just definition. Now, sourcing of capital may be regulated depending on what type we're talking about. And we'll just quickly run through some definitions. So when you talk about equity, we're referring to financing secured as an investment in the business, what you call the owner's stake. Okay, typically this is the choice for startups and for micro and small businesses. Okay. Now for debt, this is what you owe. Okay, it's secured as a loan to the business with repayment terms, typically used by SMEs operating steadily. Now, mezzanine, these are the kind of loans that you can eventually convert to equity. That means you put money in a business, but beyond lending that money, you can eventually convert it to equity. Now, I know the challenge beyond all these definitions. The challenge is, how do you secure these finances? Now, but before we go to that, I'd like to talk about the do's and don'ts, okay, when you're trying to secure finance for businesses. On the left-hand column, if you're looking at this slide, oh, I forgot. See, never get used to people moving your slides for you. Okay, so part of the do's, you have to explore existing relationships with friends and family. And when we progress, you see that a lot of small or micro businesses actually start with finance from friends and family. You have to acquire some basic understanding of accounting and finance. This kills a lot of businesses. If you look at Admiralty Way, when that place became commercialized, every day you see new businesses come up. Go there next year, you don't see them anymore. When the Palms Mall opened, every big boy and big girl opened businesses in those places. Nobody, or somehow nobody, advised them that you cannot continue to pay those dollar rents when you're earning naira and your business, you haven't done your projections. You haven't even done the modeling of all the what ifs. What if inflation rate goes from A to B? What if exchange rate moves from B to C? People just see these businesses and jump in. A never do is, do not ignore your understanding of financial projections. And more importantly, when you then start the business, you must keep proper financial records, because it helps those who know to help you actually check when you're going left or right. I recall sometime in 2012, my wife started a bakery business, and the kind of capital she put in it and the kind of equipment she had bought, I did all the Excel sheet financial projections, did all the modeling for her. And I remember telling her, from what I can see, if you do not produce 3,000 loaves of bread daily, you're not going to make profit. So you then have to determine, how soon can I get to this production level? And I said to her, if you don't get to this production level in 6 months, you'll be making losses. And also, don't get into business with this mindset of everything is too expensive. You have to plug into a kind of model. Again, using that as an example, I remember when I said to her, your accounting system is important. There'll be so much pilferage. You've done other businesses and succeeded, but you see this one, it's just like a supermarket. There's so much stealing. So you have to have strong internal control. At that point, I had advised, recruit probably a banker who has lost his job or her job, or somebody in the finance industry who's available. Pay the appropriate salary. Because if you don't, like they say, if you pay peanuts, you hire monkeys. So, when she looked at the numbers, I'm like, how can I pay somebody this kind of salary? I said, because that's what your business requires. If you're not ready to do that, don't start. I wish she came with me, and I wish it was time to give testimonies of how the business went. But that's just, you can see I'm digressing a little because I'll be faster instead of going through the slides, and then I'll speak from my experience. She actually learned the hard way. And next time she started business, nobody told her. Indeed, the IT system for the business, when I brought something I thought was robust, she thought it was expensive. Then she went for the cheaper one, and it never worked. And she lost money. And I'll come back from work after my own headache. I started coming home before her. Bankers come home late. Then I come home before I was coming. And then I asked her, let me see your sales for the week. And then something had gone wrong with the IT system. So you see, those are the don'ts and the do's. You have to appreciate the pros and cons available of available finance options. Do not accept any money. That's what that means, just because it's available. A lot of people, out of desperation, accept funds from all sorts of sources. I think I've done the do's and don'ts because I don't intend to go line by line. This presentation, I believe, should be on the website. You can dive deep. But I like to use our time more effectively by just using examples to highlight some key points, and then we can take questions. This further tries to define equity, debt, and mezzanine, and gives you the characteristics of each one. Now, for equity, the features, it requires the company to provide, that's when you're sourcing equity. It requires the company to provide financial records and business projections, just like what I talked about. For instance, in my wife's business case, she couldn't have assessed equity investors easily with the kind of records. Indeed, she had good intentions, but was looking at the cost. And I said to her, spend the money, the profit will come. So, for you to be able to assess equity investors, you have to keep proper records. You know, you don't just keep any kind of records you want and expect that people will trust and invest in that business. Now, the investor shares the risk as well as reward with the company. Investment typically has a time horizon. When people put equity, there are those that can just invest for a period of time. You see that happening even in banks. Some of the companies that we bank and we lend money to, you suddenly see them say, you know what, I want to pay back all my borrowings, because some private equity firm has come to put in money in that business, probably for like 3 years or 5 years, and then they take their money and go. That way you achieve cheaper source of finance. At the same time, you're sharing the benefits of that business with somebody who's looking for growth, especially people in economies that don't give the kind of returns you get in Africa. The returns are higher here, but of course the risk is also higher. So for equity, you could get that from owners, family and friends, crowdfunding. Of course, crowdfunding, when someone comes together and sells an idea and gathers a number of people to put money together, and then, you know, it has a local name. You could source from DFIs, you could source from private equity funds. Debt requires company to provide financial records. Again, you require the business to provide collateral for the loan, which is a major problem in Nigeria when you borrow. Because we don't have a unique national identification system, every loan you want from a bank, you're required to provide collateral, which is like the second way out if you do not repay. Although, thankfully, we have 2 credit agencies now, and BVN is gradually becoming our national identification scheme. But if you use BVN, then how many Nigerians have bank accounts? Not up to 50%. So it means we still cannot recognize, we can't differentiate one Nnamdi Okonkwo from the other, except we have that unique number. So to borrow in this climb, you still require what we call second way out, which is the alternative for me if you cannot pay me back. That's why you find people selling houses. I do get calls from time to time. You know, there are some people that like trouble. They ask you, does your bank, are you selling anybody's property? I say, yeah. I have a customer who specializes in buying houses that banks want to sell. Yeah, and what he typically does, he incorporates like 30 companies. So he buys the property in the name of those companies. So when he's selling, he just simply sells the company to you. So you own whatever the company has owned, you know. So he makes a lot of money, especially if it's Ikoyi or VI. He likes to buy those property. And he has his lawyers on standby. So that is his own business model. You know, but that's not what we're discussing today. Mezzanine, you have people who put money, they first lend it to you with a view to converting it to equity later. That's why it's called mezzanine. Like if you have a house that has 2 floors and there's a floor in between, that's the mezzanine floor. So if you lend money with the intention to convert it to equity, it's called mezzanine finance. Now, again, just a repeat of, you know, trying to deepen the characteristics of the various types of funding, the equity, the characteristics, normally you have family and friends, and to source it, they have limited review of businesses. If a family member comes to you and says he wants to borrow, excellent, I have my eyes on it. I'll finish, don't worry. Okay, he wants you to put money in business. You're not going to start asking him to give you 3 years audited financial, because obviously it's a weak form, it's a loose form of source of funds. Advantages, it's good for startups, and it requires no financial sophistication. Anybody can get money from friends and family. But then, typically, the disadvantage is that it's not usually adequate for growth of the business. So everybody's just giving you pittance. Now, crowdfunding, which I talked about before, there's limited review of the business. One person comes up with an idea and everybody just joins him. Is that Isusu? No, Isusu is that you contribute and then you use it to do something. Okay? It doesn't require equity dilution. Everybody usually comes to the table in the same terms. But this is good for startups, and it requires no financial sophistication. Because if somebody is doing crowdfunding, most times, in fact, on WhatsApp group chat, some people eventually transit that to crowdfunding arrangements. So you suddenly see the owners donating money or contributing money, by rotation, and then towards running some kind of business. DFIs and government agencies. Now, for these sophisticated ones, you require more sophisticated analysis. You need more reliable financials and so on. Now, private equity, exactly like what you get from angel investors and venture capitalists. And who is an angel investor? A wealthy individual who finds your venture attractive. He wants to put money in there for either the purpose of taking equity, or he lends it to you, and in some cases can translate that to equity. So he becomes co-owner of the business. And angel investors usually are people who are actually more inclined towards social impact, trying to help people who have good ideas but do not have financing. Then you have things like the stock exchange, which is well known to all of us. You know what happened. Somebody said that how you know that the stock market is about to go bust. When you're going, by the way, you remember what happened to the Nigerian Stock Exchange? When at some point it was growing the fastest in the world before the financial crisis of 2008. And somebody was saying, earlier this year, when our stock market started growing well, somebody said, well, now we're not yet at that bust stage. The boom is starting a little. We're also not yet at that boom stage. Now, when stock market gets to the point where your driver, sorry, how do you go back? Okay. If you get to the point where you're going to work in the morning and your driver is asking you whether you have bought company A shares or company B shares, just know that we're near a bust. Because that's when every Daleko market woman is also talking about buying shares. It's not a normal market. And that's when you see the bust will just come. Okay. I'm having issues with the slides. Pardon me. I just have about 3 slides to finish, but I'm trying to select which ones to talk about, and then we take questions, because I must be giving you a very dry topic, right? Because I'm telling you, state of, just trying to. I think there's a mistake in the slides. Somebody altered the flow of these slides. Equity. Okay. I've talked about owners, family and friends, crowdfunding, and I've talked about private equity. I'll go with your slides now, since they are my slides, rather than refer to this. Now, development financial institutions are one critical source. I think that's what is important, because you want to understand how you can access these finances. Today, most SMEs, what is good for you is not necessarily bank finance. You know, we are very strong in SMEs, but if you look at our SME portfolio, it's also strongly tilted towards intervention funds from the development financial institutions, Bank of Industry, the Central Bank MSME funds, Development Bank of Nigeria, and the likes. Today, out of the 220 billion naira BOI SME intervention fund, we have given out about 2.2 billion, and paying and reborrowing has left us with an average of about 2 billion at every point in time. And guess what? We've not recorded any defaults in the last 5 years because of the model of SME lending that we do. Because we have a unit called Managed SME Unit. So why I'm focusing on this area is most SMEs cannot survive on commercial bank lending. And for banks, because if the market dictates that we lend today at 28%, and you have to pay your own NEPA, you run your own infrastructure. If you have a distribution van, they have last mile to contend with, they have potholes to contend with, they have VIO to contend with, they have, area boys to contend with. You park your car and you pay 10,000. With all of that, an interest rate of 28, 25%, you cannot make money. That's why I would like to focus on and advise that you actually prepare your business to qualify for these intervention funds. Because under the government's ER, Economic Recovery and Growth Plan, it's usually tilted towards intervention funds like this. So having described the various sources of finance that you could get, I would advise that you actually make more inquiries on these intervention funds. Indeed, today there's something called SMEs, Agric Small Medium Enterprises Fund. And this has been built up from contribution, 5% of banks' profit, starting last year. That fund today, I think, has about 60 billion naira. Just about 160 billion naira, actually, from last year's profits of banks. Disbursement on that fund today is still less than 20 billion. Indeed, it is from that same fund that the government is now saying, rather than wait for banks to go through all the documentation to use these funds, it's from that fund you see the government with BOI going to markets to give people 10,000 naira. So when the government gives out all those 10,000 naira loans, it's not actually that they are sharing government money. This is actually from the 5% profit of all banks in the country put together under the SMEs funds. Now, in a more structured form, the Bankers Committee invited a few SMEs. I think Tara was there, this TY and co. Now, when they train people, then you lend money to them. The point I'm trying to make is, I didn't want to dwell on all those sophisticated sources of finance for SMEs. You should prepare your businesses to adequately position to take advantage of intervention funds. Because what happens is that the BOI or DBN or CBN will not pass those funds on to the SMEs. They go through banks. And those banks have to find you worthy to borrow by simple bookkeeping and keeping your records properly. So on that note, I'll stop because I think I've just made the key point, which is what I'll be advising, that you get the funds from the intervention funds. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So thank you very much, Nnamdi. He kept to time and he gave us a very insightful presentation. He's taught us about the various types of financing you have, equity, debt, mezzanine, and their sources. Intervention fund looks very attractive, but you got to get your books in order. So he's told us about the do's and the don'ts. We need to have proper record keeping. For instance, you got to have good corporate governance, and please ensure that you do not save money on the things you need to invest in. So have proper softwares in place, accounting softwares, pay good salaries for the guys who need to do the critical work in your business so that you don't have to do those things all over again. So another round of applause for Nnamdi, please, for that very good presentation. Thank you. And I'll call on Zenzi Dillon now to give us also her presentation on the same topic, available sources of financing for SMEs.
Thank you so much. All protocol observed, and that was a good presentation. Basically, that's what I was going to cover, which means I'll have less and we'll talk more. So I think the key point here is why do we need emerging enterprises? Why are they so important in any economy? It's strongly believed that they are the engines for economic growth. So emerging enterprises are the engines for economic growth. So we've got great ideas, I guess. When we knock at the doors or on the doors of banks like Fidelity, I don't know whether you require 2 years financial statements from these SMEs. Okay. The reason why I'm asking this, I think we need to have, I'm happy that you are here. And I'm expecting maybe coming out of this meeting for us to come up with a solution. Because 2 years, I've got an idea. I haven't started trading. I don't have the money. How am I going to start having a 2-year, financial history? So that's point number one. So we need to solve for that. And how are we going to solve for that? I strongly believe that we need to start thinking of innovative ways for financing the emerging businesses. As I was just looking at even history in terms of what's happening, most of these emerging enterprises, of course, they are emerging, they are startups. And you are starting up, some of us, we are privileged to have maybe some savings, so we are able to finance our businesses through our savings. Some of us, we borrow from our families because they are wealthy, but some of us, we don't even have. But God gave you an idea. As I was sitting there, the word of God came through to say we should stop being desperate as emerging businesses. Be confident, be strong, be courageous. Because it's about occupying. It's about taking over. Because SMEs are going to be the next big thing in Nigeria. And not only Nigeria, across Africa. So emerging businesses, we are rising up. And as we rise up, we need somebody to help us rise up. And we need each other to help each other to rise up. So I'll need to have maybe help from friends, from families, or maybe sell some assets. There are some people who sold assets. They had a great idea, but they had to sell their assets. A good example is Uber. The co-founders of Uber, they sold their assets, and they started up this company from about 19 million plus. Now it's about 70 billion worth of a business. So we have to start from somewhere. And maybe I don't have all that. We might have angel investors. There could be crowdfunding. Crowdfunding is becoming the big thing. The crowdfunding market size is getting bigger and bigger. We can start amongst ourselves. For example, here there's Goshen Fund. We've got the Goshen Fund that was launched last year, and it's a form of crowdfunding. But for you to access those funds, you need to have a great idea, and it must be a God idea. Anything else that is from you, we are here talking about kingdom economy, so we have to know where to get the ideas. As I shared before, God has got a great idea for each and every one of us. According to Jeremiah 29, verse 11, I know the plans that I have for you. Plans for good, not for evil. To give you a future and a hope. The other version says, an expected end. So there are people waiting for you and I to rise up so that we tap into the blueprint that God has got for you and I in terms of business. And that business, you are wired for it. No one else is going to do it except you. So if you don't rise up, you are actually going to stop other people from progressing. So we don't want to start talking small stuff. We'll start small, but let's actually tap into the spirit. Let's tap into what God is saying in terms of business. Let's actually light up. Let's not be desperate. Let's not wear desperate faces because we are suffering or because I don't have anything. We are limited by what we think we have. Let's go into the unlimited space, and God is an unlimited God with unlimited resources. He will have it. God will not give you an idea which does not have the resources. Because your vision, when you write it down, it will surely speak. It will make Mr. Mnandi not to sleep, but to locate you. Where is that person with this idea? So God, what he is doing is out of the ordinary. So let's not allow the system to actually keep us down and keep us under the lid. We are rising up above the lid and we are saying, yes, Lord, here I am. Why did you create me? He created you because he knows you have to save people. It's all about souls. It's not about driving a nice car. It's not about what? Of course, maybe a nice car is part of the tools of trade, but you are there to save souls. To answer the big question, unemployment. There is unemployment. We've got jobs that are lined up, that are logged up inside of us. But if we don't tap into the right vision, we are running somebody's vision and it's a failure because you are not wired for that. So the emerging, or they call them the SME funding gap, is about 136 billion annually. This is across Africa. And I can maybe almost say maybe a third of that could be Nigeria. I don't know what, I couldn't get that number. I tried to research a bit, but I didn't go further. I should have asked you if we had met before. But the financing gap, I think it's bigger in Nigeria because Nigeria is the biggest market. And Nigeria, spiritually, it is an apostolic nation. Because it is an apostolic nation, apostolic is about pioneering new ideas. It's about blazing. So we have to trailblaze in terms of emerging enterprises and financing of those enterprises. Not only financing, but actually coming up with incubation hubs. The incubation where the Spirit of God will just be birthing. Great ideas, birthing, business plans, implementation of those business plans. Let me say this, Mr. Mnandi will not just give you money because the Lord said, you are going to have money. It's not going to happen. You need to demonstrate capacity to repay the money. But capacity to repay the money must be supported by your business plan and the financials, the cash flows, and all that. So we need training to be able to do that. You must not just have a business because you just want to have a business. We are talking about financing the marketplace and actually discipling the marketplace and making a difference in the marketplace through our businesses. Okay, so I'm supposed to go further. I think the different types of financing, they've already been covered. We don't need to labor on that. As I was just reflecting on these different types of funding, crowdfunding is not new even in the Bible. In Acts chapter 4, people sold their land, people sold their possessions, they brought the money to the feet of the apostles, which I believe was the banking system, and they were able to distribute. So that's part of the crowdfunding. So crowdfunding is happening, and we do have the Goshen Fund, which is available. If you want to know more about it, I think, yes. Our sister should be able to, share more about the fund. So there's a scripture, one of my favorite scriptures, which says there was a poor wise man. You know, he was wise but very poor. Through his wisdom, he saved the city. But nobody remembered him because he was poor. So, which means money has got a voice. So, money is a spirit. We are not going to chase after money. We are going to chase after God's heart. And money will follow us. And as we chase after God's heart in terms of serving his people, we have to say, Lord, how do you want me to serve your people? And he will give you the idea. And as we do that, that gifting is going to make room for you. And you are going to sit at the table where you'll be able to influence even the emerging enterprises policy direction. Government, we need to influence them, but they are waiting for you to rise up. And there's only one thing that is going to make you rise up. Of course, the word of God says, arise, shine, for your light has come. But there's another level that attracts kings, the brightness of your rising, which is now your vision. You've got something, and that vision, how am I going to implement it, Lord? Where is the funding? I started off with the help of my husband, Camel Global Capital. I did not have to go to the bank. We haven't gone to the bank. But it has been through our savings and family savings, we have been getting it. And money is going to come. Money is coming. But it has to start from somewhere. Now you may say, maybe they've got money. No, God has got the money. I don't want us to over-spiritualize stuff and come out of this place empty. We need to actually get back to the basics and know what this is all about. It's about God. It's about saving the souls. God wants people to be redeemed out of poverty. And we have the solution. God wants, the nation of Nigeria to change. And the nation of Nigeria, it's going to be an SME or emerging enterprise-led economy. And innovation is going to happen here in Nigeria. And we have to work together, my brother, to make it happen. My brother, again, he shared on angel investing. Venture capitalists, they'll come in. So these venture capitalists, they'll come in, they'll put money on the table, they'll get some shares, and they'll need a seat at the table. So guess what they'll do? They'll start now influencing even your strategic direction and decisions. So they have to be like-minded. So we need venture capitalists who've got the mind of Christ. And not only the mind of Christ, but the ones that God has sent to your business. So don't be desperate. I got that as well. Don't be desperate to get any money. Because some of the money is meant to capture your business. Destiny hijacking demons can come through that. So we need to be careful about that. And of course, these venture capitalists, angel investors, they'll bring experience and they'll help you grow the business, but they must be the right partners. The other traditional sources of financing, my brother has clearly articulated that. Again, we need to think outside the box in terms of how the emerging enterprises are supported. So there is financial support, non-financial support. The non-financial support, how do I come up with I've got a great business plan, how do I put it on paper? I'm glad that you do have that in place. And then there's also access to markets. So when we start now developing our businesses, don't make it local. Start local, but think global. So the Lord bless you all.
Another round of applause for us. We've heard from her that emerging enterprises, they are the angels for economic growth. And that 90% of businesses in Africa, they're SMEs. And that on a year-on-year basis, we need like $136 billion of financing. It's a huge gap. And the question is, how do we bridge it? And that we need to come up with great financing financing options, which include venture capital, private equity, and the rest of them, and also have business incubation hubs. And I think above all, in all that you've said, I'd like to note this in conclusion, that we need to chase after God's heart, and that money will follow us. So we shouldn't forget God in all of this. So thank you very much, Zinzi, and thank you very much, Nnamdi. I have quite some questions here, and I think we still have some 15 minutes or so to respond to the questions. So I'll take them in bits of 2-2 for Zinzi, and then we'll start with Nnamdi, and then we also do 2 for Zinzi. So just give me a moment. So now, starting off with these ones, there are some practical issues. They said in terms of getting financing. And this question has about a young entrepreneur who has a company name but has no registration yet. And he needs to get funding from institutions, financial institution, but they're insisting on their CAC registration and other documents. That is their way that he can go around this to fast track. And then also that our banks and financial institutions in this climate, they do not accept land in rural areas as collateral. And that, so how do you go around it as in terms of having the right, in terms of them accepting it, because it's also land and it's an asset that is owned by the property, to be guys looking for investment. And Zinzi, I have this one. It is difficult to set up funding it's difficult to access funding in Nigeria. I know you're not a Nigerian, but that's especially in the banks. I like that. So that banking is difficult, but what other sources around here do you think we can access? I think we should start off with that first.
Okay, thank you very much for those questions. First of all, let me clarify the statistics that she wanted. You're absolutely right. In Africa, it's $136 billion. But in Nigeria, it is 9.6 trillion naira, the funding gap for SMEs, and that translates to $26 billion. So it means that Nigeria has 26 billion shortfall out of 136. I would have even expected that it was more given our size. Yeah, but I mean, that's what the CBN and IFC say. Now, you have a company, you have a business idea, you want to borrow money from the bank, but you don't have a registered company. Now, unfortunately, a bank can lend you money in your individual capacity, which means you qualify for what we call consumer loans. For instance, if you're working, you can borrow money to buy a car in your name. You can take payday loans. You can take a mortgage in your name. But then when you're borrowing to run business, this is exactly the heart of what we're talking about. You're not a business yet until you become a corporate person, a registered person, not corporate, because incorporated companies are more sophisticated than basic business registered names. What does it take? Indeed, for me, if you approach me to borrow money as a business and you don't even have a business name, it means you're not even ready for business. And unfortunately, the business we run is business, it's not play. We're custodians of other people's funds, and we have fiduciary responsibility to those depositors. So if you're going to borrow money as a business, you first have to become a business. And how much does it take? How much does it take to register a company? Not much. Basic company registration. And with the sophistication of the Corporate Affairs Commission now, I think you can achieve registration now like within 48 to 72 hours. So really, this is what we're saying. You have to be ready for business. You don't just wish business. And that's where advice comes in. Again, if you don't, maybe you want to be a petty trader first and then start, unstructured, unregistered. Then you build up to qualify. Now, banks do not accept land in rural areas. That is the story of our nation, and it has to do with the same infrastructure problems that we have. If I have a land, there's a popular musician in those days. I remember when I started banking, sometime he was one of those well-known musicians around 1992 or so. He had borrowed money from the bank where I was working, But then he has this house. We all thought he had it in Enugu, but he's from a village near Enugu. And very big mansion, the pictures, everything. He had title. But if you can reclaim that land, nobody will buy from you. The locals will chase buyers away with cutlasses. So a bank would then not go, you can't come and take land in my village. If I default, who's going to buy that land from you? Again, we have issues about government inefficiencies where a lot of those lands do not have title. So at best, some Omonile has given you a receipt. That's not registrable. It's not realizable in law. So that's why when people vilify banks for not doing certain things, I say to them, remember, the money belongs to other people. And if I take a decision that would disturb me from returning the money to investors, then I'll be held accountable. So that's the story of our nation. If you do not have valid title, you cannot borrow. But this will be solved if we have a national identification scheme, that one person is one person and not two. BVN is doing that, but not everybody has BVN. The day all Nigerians have a bank verification number, even elections will become easier to conduct. Yeah, because then if you can't be me. Thank you.
So we'll quickly take a response from Zenzi, and I think we just have time for one more question for each one of you before we wrap up.
Right, my brother Mnandi, I hope I'm pronouncing it right. Mnandi. Mnandi. It's not only the story of Nigeria, but the story of Africa. 65% of arable land globally is found on the continent of Africa. And we need to be able to, again, I'm thinking, let's think about innovative ways of harnessing and leveraging the rural land, because land is land. Yep. It's a resource on its own. It's an asset. So there has to be some rural land banking model somehow. Right. I know the challenge would be the ownership of the land and all that, but I think we can work through tribal chiefs, if you've got those kind of structures, who can actually verify, but then there's also education for those tribal chiefs to be able to enable that. That's a process on its own. Somebody asked a question on the other sources of funding outside Nigeria. It's difficult to access funding here in Nigeria. They are investors, still the same category of investors outside. Most of them, they'll probably look to invest in your idea because they believe in it. But there's also issues around foreign currency risk and all that stuff. So I would suggest that as a starting point, start building small whilst thinking big. And when you are ready now to access the international capital markets or international credit markets, then there will be a process to do that. You can call me, I can leave my card when you are ready for it. But let's do it in a much more structured way so that we don't just fly out, with a funding need that can be solved at a local level without you incurring additional costs through foreign exchange hedging and all that.
Sorry, just to give added flesh to that contribution, it's not true that foreign investors do not lend to SMEs. The African Development Bank just last week gave us $50 million to focus on women entrepreneurs. If you look at the last two slides here, you see a lot of funding opportunities. There is the Tony Elumelu Foundation, there's Faith Foundation, there Dangote Foundation. A lot of these foundations have vehicles through which they give out these funds, but you must be prepared. We have them if you research. We have them,
So this is very insightful. There are several available local sources of funding. We have just not, maybe information is knowledge, so we're getting the information now. So let me ask one last bit of question. Our time is fast spent. This one has to do with, to go to Nnamdi, that the loan scheme for SMEs tagged AG, SME, IS is currently on, and the loan is about 3 million. But for you to apply, you need to go through an entrepreneurial center designated by CBN and BOI. And one center is LBS. And that LBS stated that it can only get that fund after you go through a course there, which cost over 1 million naira school fees.
That's
and you're accessing
absolutely
3
false.
million.
Absolutely
So-
false. Absolutely false. It's not true.
Okay, so we've clarified that.
Why would anybody do that? As a matter of fact, before I closed yesterday, the central bank sent to my mailbox and to the head of SMEs a list of beneficiaries of those funds. And they said, confirm that these are your customers so we can disburse. The disbursements have been long in coming, but it's beginning to happen now.
Fantastic.
But nobody, I don't know, if anybody tells you to pay 1 million naira to access SMEs, it is not true.
True.
Up to 1 million naira. No. If Lagos Business School trains people for courses at 1 million, it is not a requirement to get the SMEs funds.
Absolutely. So it's
It's just like saying Harvard trains people for $10,000.
Yeah.
So they send you to Harvard before you borrow. That doesn't make sense. This is meant for hairdressers, different kinds of people. Okay, let me then add this one. Talking about preparing people to qualify. At Fidelity, at Adeyemo and Lakija here, we have a managed SME unit. So if you bank with us and you want to prepare to access some of these funds, they help you with hand-holding, capacity building. They teach you. We don't charge anything. There's a guy who sent a WhatsApp picture of the shoes he makes to me. And I said, if you made these shoes, we should be funding you. Come and see me. Indeed, that's his cousin there, Henry, yeah? Your nephew, right? I didn't even know. So I said, come. And currently, he's working with our team to help him put his act together. If you see the shoes the guy made, the pictures alone, I was shocked. I said to him, I wear those shoes proudly. And the guy is in his 20s.
That's fantastic.
So these things are happening, but people don't know. Please don't let anybody deceive you. Yesterday, somebody was sharing something about recruitment. A lot of fraud is going on. Let nobody tell you need 1 million to train to get a loan. How much are you starting the business with? Thank you.
All right, thank you. The last question, though you've answered it, it's about accessing funding offshore, but they said also from sophisticated investors like private equity funds from Silicon Valley. People are always hearing that they're investing in firms locally, SMEs, so that, do you have a route to accessing that? So maybe Zinti can help us.
Yeah, the route is there. I think access points are there. If there's anyone who wants to access those points, I can assist. We are also in Silicon Valley, so we've got a couple of people that we can connect you to. Nothing is impossible. But please, let's start local.
And I think that's very good advice. So another round of applause for our speakers. So thank you all for participating in this session. We are all now required to return to the auditorium.